evening. Tonight we address the big story of the day, and then we shall move on to debate the big story of the month. So let's begin with the CBI crisis first and discuss what really can happen next. Here is how things stand right now, viewers. The top two officials have been sent on leave pending investigation against them. The top court has now stepped in to ensure that the investigation into the grave allegations of corruption against the CBI chief, that investigation is done in a fair manner. And so while CVC probes the complaint that has been filed against Alok Verma, a retired Supreme Court judge will keep an eye on all the developments and the investigation. Meanwhile, the interim CBI chief, Nageswara Rao, who shunted a few officers, made new appointments, cannot take any more policy decisions. All his actions so far will be scrutinized by the Supreme Court. Now, voters, the fact is that there is some corruption within the CBI, and that cannot really be denied. The fact that CBI often battles external influences and political pressures is also really difficult to deny. And these are two generic comments that I'm making, which I don't think there can really be a debate on. But as we stare at the organization that is meant to probe corruption in our administration, I see a destroyed institution. Not destroyed overnight, but over years and decades of successive governments, in whom we are losing faith by the day even now. How can we make CBI the independent, fair institution that it should be? That is the big question tonight. No politics, no rhetorics, simply a constructive and perhaps a hopeful conversation. And for that, I have with me Kailash Vasudev, Senior Advocate of the Supreme Court, Mr. K. Raghotaman, former CBI officer, and we'll also have Rahul Mehra, the Advocate with the Supreme Court, joining us very shortly. So let me ask the former CBI officer what he believes can be done, because the situation we are looking at right now, Mr. Raghotaman, is that the Supreme Court wants to monitor the probe into allegations against the CBI chief. The CBI number 2 is under the scanner, and we've even restricted the powers of the interim chief. How do we fix this problem?
I see it as a face-saving method of order given by the Supreme Court. They have not gone into the main request of the Alok Verma ji petition, in their petition, that the government has no power, but they divested him of power against the CBC Act and DSP Act. That is the main issue for which the Supreme Court has rightly told that the main issue will be addressed and it will be heard on 12th November. But in the meanwhile, the Cabinet Secretary who has written a complaint against Director CBI sent to the CVC, that is there some allegations have been mentioned against the Director. That has to be verified. Now the scope of inquiry is very limited, that the Cabinet Secretary has alleged certain misconduct on the part of the CBI Director, and that has to be completed within 2 weeks. That's also very apt. And in that circumstances, the CBI, as you told, the damage has been done and nobody can retrieve it back. Nobody can be retrieved back. And corruption-free organization should be the main motto of CBI. And if it is infested with the corrupting officers and it has no end for it, and the name is lost, the public confidence has lost, and the court, judiciary and other organizations have been lost, and the ongoing investigation will also be affected. The morality of the investigating officers will go down definitely, and they cannot face the accused. And they will say, your officers are corrupt, why you are investigating against me? So that will be the allegations to be faced by the investigating officers in future. And this has to be done. 12th November, till 12th November, we have to wait and see as to what further action can be taken.
Yes. So, Mr. Kailash Vasudev, 2 days ago, I had a conversation and a debate over what happens to the crucial cases which are currently under investigation by the CBI. There may be some of them where there is an impact, they are under investigation. Two of these gentlemen have actually investigated those cases or headed the teams, and that's one aspect of what happens next. The other aspect is fixing the institution or reviving the credibility of the institution. And for the past 2 days, I have been thinking about it. How do you ensure that the CBI becomes, and can you ensure that the CBI becomes an independent institution? Is there a way of ensuring that there is one arm distance between the government and this body?
It is unfortunate today that the CBI, which is called the Central Bureau of Investigation, a premier
Yes, Mr. Vasudev, go ahead, please. The question is to you.
No, go ahead, sir. See, the question is, what is to be done today? Let us look at it in a larger perspective. The Central Bureau of Investigation, a premier investigating agency, which is investigating into myriad cases, touching upon everyday life for all of us, starting from banking frauds down to corruption in ministries, down to God knows what have you, is now itself become a den of corruption. It is sad when somebody today in court proceedings, standing outside the Supreme Court, turn around and say, they're not the CBI anymore, it's the Corruption Bureau of India. It rankled me because it was a very upsetting statement to hear what an average man is thinking about it. Now, you're asking about how to restore the independence of a system, of an existing system which has gone haywire. The CBI has not gone haywire today. It has been haywire from its very institution, 1946. It has been haywire because it was given a limited role for purposes of supporting the government in power. It was investigating into misappropriations in the Second World War, which was necessary for the British to protect in its own days. Today, the politicians and the people in power use the CBI for the purposes of eliminating those who are a thorn on the sides. Investigations into crimes take years together. The percentage of convictions remain in the range of about 60%. If a premier agency is going to have a conviction rate of about 60%, it tells you that it is not doing its job very well. To bring about a rectification in the system, you require very professional people. To have a very professional setup, you have to stop deputation. You've got to take the power out of government to appoint people to the CBI and transfer them back. Moment you have this capacity in the hands of government to appoint a person on deputation and send him back to some other place, you have a chance to play with the system. Moment you play with the system, corruption sets in. Moment corruption system, integrity goes. Moment integrity goes, the system fails. The whole system today, I'm glad there's an exposure. We may have very powerful views on who's right and who's wrong, etc. I am not on that at all. But you've got a chance today to remedy and bring about a situation where we can have a totally independent investigating agency which will be given worldwide coverage. Do you realize that with this war today and the failure of anybody in government to make a statement, whether it's right or wrong, what's going to happen in those very many cases which are being investigated by them? Yes. Everybody will say that, the accused person will turn around and say, this whole investigation is biased, it is false, it is based on fabricated evidence. We've opened up a can of worms which will destroy us. It will destroy the nation. It will destroy our security systems. You've arrested IB people today.
Yes.
What makes one wonder is that the people who were arrested from the IB were visibly officers of the Intelligence Bureau. What kind of spies are these? Yes. What kind of duty are they discharging? For God's sakes, you have a certain duty to discharge. Do it correctly. Spying is cloak and dagger. It is not coming up and saying, I'm CBI, I'm going to arrest you. No, that is not the purpose. Please, in our interest, in the interest of this nation, this great country called India, let these men in police uniforms who are manning all agencies bring about certain semblance to themselves. When a policeman arrests somebody, बोला खरीद लो उसको जी, पैसे दे दो वो ठीक हो जाएगा. This is what the policeman's average image is. Gangs and gangsters, said this policeman, oh inspector मेरे हाथ में है. I'm using the Hindi words because this is what we hear in court. Do you realize what impression we have got? Today we're carrying the same impression about the CBI. CBI, ठीक है, देखेंगे, Corruption Bureau of India.
Yeah, I mean,
what are we doing?
Look at the kind of conversations
Where is it
people
going to
are
stop?
having. वो उसके camp में हैं.
This is
These
very
are there
hurtful.
in WhatsApp forwards that the common man is getting and discussing, and this is the conversation in living room. XYZ is from that camp, ABC is from this camp. This is that power broker who was also in that complaint. This middleman came. इसने उसकी setting करा दी. ये इसने अपनी side बदल ली. These are the conversations,
That's right.
and we're having these conversations about the premier investigative agency, which is supposed to deliver justice to us. So what you are saying, Mr. Kailash Vasudev, is absolutely correct, and that what you're saying must be done. My question tonight is, who will do that? Is your appeal to the Supreme Court today, is that the only institution right now that can maybe come up with some set of rules and guidelines? So let me take that question to Rahul Mehra and ask him. Rahul Mehra, is Supreme Court the only institution that can do that, or can Supreme Court also not do this?
Look, the Supreme Court can go to an extent.
Surely can do this.
It can't go beyond the point.
The question is that who's going
Supreme
to...
Court.
Yes, Mr. Vasudev, I'll come back to you. Let me just ask Rahul Mehra on that point. Yes.
No, I'll answer later.
So I do believe that the Supreme Court surely can do this. The question is, it's not about whether the Supreme Court can do it. The question is whether the Supreme Court will do it. And the question is, if not now, then when? This is the lowest level that any premier investigating agency, forget about premier, any investigating agency could get to. This is the worst of the worst that one is seeing, and that too in the public domain. I am absolutely elated by the fact that, things which only lawyers, people who were actually, within the realms of the investigative agency called CBI were already aware of. Now the ordinary citizen of this country too is aware of the very same ills that plague this very investigating agency. CBI is also a reflection of what goes around in our ordinary day-to-day lives. CBI is not untouched by the people, is very much a reflection of what, what kind of society that we live in. But having said that, the Supreme Court of India, in the Prakash Singh matter, had said that, police, there were certain police reforms which were supposed to be brought in. Now, I would like to see that this is the moment which the Supreme Court needs to seize, and seize it right now and right here. Ensure that every chief secretary, maybe every chief, every head of the state is, including the head of the police of every state, is brought to the court. Affidavits, no more affidavits. It's the action that is required, because we get lost in affidavits after affidavits. The intent is clear by the Supreme Court in that judgment, and the mandate and the law of the land is that you need to really isolate the police. You really need to insulate the police. You really need to get it out of the clutches of the powers that be.
Yes.
But the reality is that it's the very same politician who wants control over these very investigating agencies to ensure that, whatever they want against their political opponent, against people whom they want to fix, this agency can be an instrument in their hands to use and to achieve those ulterior objectives of the politicians in power.
So exactly.
Therefore, there is a clear contempt of the Supreme Court judgment, and that contempt needs to be translated in court, and court needs to ensure that they step in and they ask the governments and they force the governments, because the governments are not going to do it on their own. They have to be forced now to ensure that there is implementation of that judgment, which is more than 10 years old.
Yeah.
So therefore, now it is about initiating that contempt and sending a few people behind bar. That is the way, we've seen time and over again that when governments change, affidavits change. When governments change, CBI officers change. With the change in the officers at the top, there is a change in the stand that is taken in a certain corrupt practices or the allegations which are there in a particular matter against a political bigwig. Now, all this shows surely this is a caged parrot. And now, either it's time that you completely
let me ask this question then.
do away with the CBI, which obviously is not the solution.
Yes.
Sorry?
So let me ask this question then, and one by one, all of you can answer this. I was reading up on what Mr. Arun Jaitley said in 2013. You know, back when the whole cage parrot controversy happened, when the Supreme Court had pulled up the CBI. I mean, perhaps before this, that was the last big time that the CBI was exposed and
Whole
slammed
India.
in such a bad way. And at that point of time, Mr. Jaitley had written that on the basis of above, we are of the categorical opinion that considering that these are the suggestions that you could do. The CBI should have two wings. Director CBI will head the entire organization. Under him, there will be a separate directorate of prosecution that should function. The investigative wing and the prosecution wing of the CBI should act independently. In fact, if I am not mistaken, the suggestion was also to say that you remove it from under DOPT and bring it under Lokpal. And that would perhaps bring in some distance between the government and the investigative agency. So my question today is, are there such things that can be done that perhaps the Supreme Court can now look into, because the case has now reached the Supreme Court again? Mr. Raghuttaman, will that help if CBI is taken away from DOPT, if we strike down that the act which it is under right now, bring it under the Lokpal and give it some distance there?
Yeah, that was a cry and a huge issue and to eradicate the corruption. The CBI should be insulated from all political interference, and it should have its own independency in the investigation of cases without bias or any motive. And that should be achieved, in my opinion, by the head of the department. Whoever comes to the CBI and whoever heads the department, it is left to his will and pleasure whether he obliges the politician or not. I have seen some of the CBI directors, they will listen to the politician and they will say, sorry, sir, and this is the matter, this is what I want to do. I mean, this is based on the evidence, sir. And the many ministers have listened to the request of the CBI directors. So, there is individual is making this issue. Two individuals have made this issue, and as a result, we want to demolish it, or we want to once for all take it out, as our friend told, do away with the CBI. No, we cannot do it like that. Now, in Lokpal also, Lokayukta, you see in Karnataka what happened. Lokayukta got into the bribery charges, and his son was collecting money. And Santosh Hegde, who was heading that Lokayukta in Karnataka, and he felt very bad, and it was an organization which was built by Santosh Hegde, and that was demolished by another man. So, if a single man or officers who are heading the institution, if demolishing, and what is the way out? Now, my question is, they should be accountable to someone, not to the politician or not to the ruling party, not to the ruling party. Why I say this? Why I say this? We are accountable to the court. When I register an FIR, I send it to the court. When I arrest an accused, I produce them before the court. And when I file a charge sheet, I file before the court. And the trial is conducted by the court, and my investigation is judged by the Justice Department, judiciary, and not by the government of ruling party or anybody in that matter. Now, leave alone the CVC. But this is the practical aspect we are doing it. And in that case, as in the USA, why not this department be attached to the Department of Justice, which is an independent and constitutional authority? And that will be a collective administrative can be there, and the appointment can be made by them. And as one of our friend told, the skill of the investigating officer of their own cadre should be built up. And any officer from state police will have, because they will have to go back to the state, and they will have to face the politician. Not that. See, it's all personal. And you cannot take it out, the color of it. Now, if I am a CBI officer, I face the inquiry. If I have done something wrong, I face the inquiry, I will be dismissed, and I will be charge sheeted. And that should be the end. Whereas, in the deputations who have come here, and they oblige it, and they go back again, and they have to be under the political rule. So that is a damaging thing. So my suggestion would be, let it be attached to the Chief Justice or the judiciary. And that will solve Lokpal, Lokayukta or anything. That is, if they do it, and if that is, we have to see whether it functions and correctly or not.
Right.
Anyway, we have to experiment with a new method.
Okay,
And
let
we
me
have to
take
go
that
for the
point,
change.
sir.
We have to change.
Mr.
We have to
Raghavan, let
change.
me take that
There is
point,
no question
sir.
of,
And take it across to Mr.
Yeah.
Kailash Vasudev and ask him if he agrees.
Yes.
Mr. Kailash Vasudev, can CBI then come under the Department of Justice, be separated from the government, be monitored by the judiciary? Or like I read out what Arun Jaitley suggested, that you bring it under Lokpal, you make two different wings in all cases that are referred to the Lokpal. The Lokpal takes, scrutinizes every action of the CBI investigative team. Is that something which is practical? How do we make CBI independent?
There are two ways to make CBI independent. You cannot possibly attach it to the court because the court functions independently. Under the doctrine of separation of powers, you have a legislative wing, the executive wing, and the judiciary. The judiciary is overall absolutely independent from functionings of the state, and you cannot possibly attach a state department to function under the judiciary. That concept is not existent and should not be given effect to. How to make the CBI independent is a very simple answer. Like you have acts, I have mentioned this before on your channel and I repeat it. You have acts, you have the Army Act, the Navy Act, the Air Force Act, the ITBP Act, the CRPF Act, and so on and so forth, which govern the services as also the paramilitary services. You can create an independent body in the form of the Central Bureau of Investigation for the purposes of investigating into all crime, giving it overall powers, which it can exercise over the states as also in the center. Today, a request has to be made by a state, or the CBI has to take permission from a state to investigate into a matter in the state, which causes a lot of difficulty because the state may or may not grant permission, and then the matter becomes stale by the time the investigations begin.
Yes.
There are cases of the CBI pending since the 80s, which are yet to come to fruition. Now, if there's going to be a 30-year delay into an investigation, a prime body, allegedly prime body like the CBI, it tells you how it functions. So therefore, you must have an independent act, a strict statute to govern the CBI.
Yes.
It must have its own officers. It must have its own cadres. It must have somebody who can look into the functioning of the CBI,
right.
And that is the Lok Ayukt.
Right. Well,
the Lok Ayukt Act has been sought from the times of Anna Hazare and all, but no political party wants to bring it in because they know they will take away their powers.
So the one thing is very clear, and I'm sorry I'm interrupting you, Mr. Vasudev, but because I'm running out of time, I'm going to take these 2-3 points to summarize for tonight. But I'm very sure that all of us will have a conversation in the coming days as the Supreme Court hears the other aspects of this case. The CBI crisis, corruption in CBI has reached the Supreme Court and it will be scrutinized in detail, and then we will have more of these conversations about how to revive the credibility of this institution, how to genuinely make it independent, perhaps its own cadre, where officers are not sent from different states and departments on deputation to this, will bring about some more integrity and loyalty. Perhaps a new act that governs the CBI like it does for many other institutions. And of course, a lot more of scrutiny, some accountability with the Lokpal. Some of the things, Mr. Jaitley wrote a very detailed submission in 2013. Maybe he wants to go back and revisit some of those ideas and discuss it with his peers. Will the government actually do what they advised others to do when they were in the opposition? That becomes a big question, but it must be done. Far too much of damage has been done not just to this institution but to the cases and the investigations that are currently underway. What happens to those cases and justice in those cases, we must think about that. Thank you to our panelists for joining us on this debate. We move on to debate number 2. And debate number 2 is the impact of MeToo and how to handle a certain kind of cases. Now, why are we debating this? Because there's a curious case that has come forward, which is the allegations of sexual harassment that have been made against the BCCI CEO Rahul Johri. These allegations were made anonymously in an open letter on public platform, but by a woman who chose now to divulge her identity. She accused him of sexual harassment. She accused him of demanding sexual favors when she went for a job interview. This was even before he became the BCCI CEO. BCCI Committee of Administrators at that point of time, when the allegations came out a couple of weeks ago, said that they will look into it, that they have issued a notice to the CEO to respond to these allegations. Today, as things stand, viewers, the Committee of Administrators that was appointed by the Supreme Court to run the BCCI is divided on the issue. Pending investigation, should Rahul Johri continue as the CEO of our cricketing body? Or should he be suspended, sacked or removed? Diana Adelji, former cricketer who's on this panel Committee of Administrators, believes that he must go. That you cannot have a man running the office, part of the office, when there are such grave allegations, even if the complainant remains anonymous. Vinod Rai, who heads this Committee of Administrators, believes that unless and until there is a fair investigation, no such steps should be taken, that Rahul Johri should be given a chance to explain himself. There are at least 7 to 8 different state cricket associations who've now written to the BCCI demanding stricter action. The basic point is, what should organizations do? What should we as a society do when serious sexual harassment allegations are made against somebody who is in a position of power, but are done so either via third party or anonymously? In the case of NJ Akbar, it was very clear. Women revealed their identities. They came forward to tell their own stories. In the case of Alok Nath, it is very clear. Vinta Nanda has revealed her identity, narrated her own story. In the case of Sajid Khan, it is very clear. There are more than 3 women who've come out, revealed their identities, and they've told their story. So when associations and organizations take action against them, choose not to work with them, condemn them, sideline them, or legally punish them, it's a different story. What do you do when the complainant is anonymous and will not come forward to reveal her identity and personally file a complaint? That's the big debate. Joining us this evening, Mr. Srivatsa, senior sports journalist. Rahul Mehra continues to stay with us, advocate with the Supreme Court. Dr. Bimal Soni, deputy president of the Rajasthan Cricket Association. And Simran Kaur Suri has also agreed to join us. She's an actress who herself has shared her own story. And I want to ask Simran first what she thinks should be the ideal response in such a scenario, Simran. Unlike your case where you came forward and narrated your story and people listened to you, in the case of Rahul Johri and several others, the identity of the complainant or the accuser has remained anonymous. What should be done in that case?
The investigation definitely is mandatory, it should be done, but I think snatching that very position of the power that was given to that person is needed, because that person might have misused the position to get sexual favors from somebody and have not respected that job. So I think if we go legal, there will be investigation that will take time, but snatching that position, I think, is the first step that we should do.
So you do believe that a pending investigation, that person should not be in that position of power. And once you have finished your investigation, then you can decide of what should be done, because that's exactly what Diana Adelji, who's on this Committee of Administrators, is saying. But Vinod Rai disagrees. He says, let's find out first if there is a merit to this, since it's anonymous, and then we will decide. Meanwhile, he can continue. Is there a danger that he may be, is there a danger to this situation right now, Simran?
Danger, see, I don't know, somebody who is not revealing the identity, it might not be the genuine case, but we have to respect that person, that that person has come out and shared the story, and we cannot just neglect it without giving any importance to it. And taking actions, I think it might give her more courage that she's getting a support from everybody, so she will tell her story in public, face to face. You need some courage and support from everybody, to come out and talk about it.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's the first thing, and that's what we've been emphasizing every time we've had conversations about MeToo, that anybody who does speak up and does come out with their story must be given all their support. Only then can we bring about a change. Mr. Bimal Soni, good evening to you. What is your view at this point of time? What should be the response from BCCI?
Well, I am with Mr. Vinod Rai on this subject. What I feel is that first, an anonymous caller has done this information, and without investigation, he should not resign. He should not be asked to resign, because pending investigation, you cannot judge a man to be guilty. Like these kinds of allegations can be made by anybody without having some basis. So what I feel is, let the investigation go on. If you find something wrong, of course, ask the CEO to resign or be suspended, but not before we are sure of the allegations which have been put. So I am with Vinod Rai ji.
Are you saying
that,
this?
Mr. Rahul Johri should continue in the job.
Are you saying this should be the rule for all complaints and investigations, or
No,
only when they're anonymous?
When they are anonymous. If they are genuinely spoken by the person concerned, then also, unless proved, the person should not be asked to, should not be suspended or removed from the post.
But
because a mere allegation,
yes,
the person has some rights, the person has some legal sanctity, that he cannot be called a guilty person without having mandatory chance to speak, to get investigated, and once he is proved, of course he has to resign immediately.
Right, but we have seen instances.
Not by just a simple accusation.
We have seen instances, and ideally, when there is a serious charge of a serious crime, that when it's somebody who's in a position of power, you ask that person to step aside pending the investigation. Because he is in a position of power, he'll be able to use that position of power. And I'm not just specifically talking about Rahul Johri. Anybody in any organization, if you're in a position of power, you're able to intimidate the complainant, you are able to influence the investigation, which is why it's always better if you step aside. Rahul Mehra, what should be the way forward? The Committee of Administrators is divided. They've said, okay, 15 days, let the investigation happen, then we will decide. But perhaps if they had chosen to make him resign or suspend him, wouldn't that give the lady some more courage to come out and speak up about it? She is taking on a powerful man.
Well, this is a bit of a yes and a bit of a no. First of all, I have no doubt in my mind, had it been the powers that be in BCCI, which have been ruling the roost over the last 30, 40 years, even this inquiry of 15 days would not have seen the day of light. So, make no mistake about it, these are people who brush everything under the carpet. The politicians which cut across political party lines, which rule BCCI, be it BJP, Congress, RJD, whosoever, across political lines, they're all there. And they are there to protect each other, to scratch each other's back. Now, you expect different standards when there is an independent person like Mr. Vinod Rai and Diana. So I'm glad that it's a time-bound 15 days inquiry. To come to your question as to whether the person concerned, and when you are in a position of power, whether you should step aside, even if you're not made to forced to step aside, I think that's a personal call. And in all likelihood, as a citizen, I would say the person should be forced to set aside. To be set aside, but as a student of law and somebody who practices law, I would say that the principles of natural justice must kick in, and therefore a person must be given a fair opportunity. And 15 days is an extremely reasonable period of time to conclude an inquiry. Had it been an unended, not a time-bound kind of an inquiry, I think that would really put pressure on the committee that either it should be time-bound or the person should be asked to step aside, because there could be some kind of influence. In this case, the person itself is an anonymous complaint.
Yes.
But there is another larger issue. You know, the larger issue is the committee itself. Now, which is this committee? If I get it right, there's a former police officer, there is a former DCW chairperson, and there is a retired judge.
Yes.
2 out of 3 of them happen to be male members, if I get my facts right.
Yes.
Now, that is completely unacceptable. The majority has to be women, and there is a criteria under the Prevention of Sexual Harassment at Workplaces Act. There is a complete criteria, and more so, the more alarming aspect, and I hope Mr. Vinod Rai and Diana both address it immediately right now, is have an internal committee at BCCI. I mean, why is there not an internal committee at BCCI? Why is there a complete vacuum and absence of this thing in such a powerful body, a body which has $5 billion in its kitty as profits? I just fail to understand how can you survive in this modern era without such an internal committee.
Yes.
The Act itself specifies. The Act itself specifies that there has to be an internal committee. If the internal committee is missing, then there has to be a local committee, and the local committee is formed by a district officer. The district officer is appointed by a local government, and therefore all of this mechanism is missing. The very ethos, the principle
the COA, which was supposed to be there for only a
committee, is completely missing.
Well, the COA, which is supposed to be there for a shorter period of time to just fix things in BCCI and hand it over to a proper leadership organization and move out, is still trying to clean up that mess which is there in BCCI. But you have a point there, and I do hope that the Committee of Administrators makes a note of this, that there has to be an internal committee. To what Raul Mehra was saying, the panel that has been established now to investigate the complaint, the chairman is Justice Rakesh Sharma, former DCW Chief Barkha Singh will be on the panel, and former CBI Director PC Sharma will be on this committee. So those are the 3 people who are now investigating the case and will do so in the next 15 days. But Mr. Srivatsa, where do you stand on this debate? And not just for the BCCI CEO. In any organization, when an anonymous complaint comes, what is the ideal response?
See, basically in this kind of situations, you cannot have an internal committee because the person complainant is not an employee of the board. So that makes a bit of a problem. That's why they have constituted an independent committee, outsiders. So let them take a view. I mean, I agree. Just as Rahul said, even the composition of the committee says a lot. See, even in the COA, there are only 2 people. If the 4 people were there, the original committee, perhaps they could have taken a call. But in this case, predictably, Diana took a different view, and Mr. Vinod Rai took a different view. So the same thing might happen even in that committee, 3-member committee. So that can create a bit of a problem, as Rahul raised the thing. Outsiders might say the same thing. The general view will be that it should have been different. Women should have been more. There is no end to this kind of an argument. But then what happens basically in a situation like this, and this is an incident which has happened much before Jory came to cricket board. So that's another thing. So the person who has complained has to come forward and make a statement. Of course, now I believe she has agreed to do that. So let's see how it works out. Then only you can take it forward. But the fact remains that how they are going to decide on the modalities of inquiry, whether they should treat it as the cricket board's problem or something which has happened outside. Like in some cases they said, it's your problem, you have to deal with it, not us. If this committee also takes that kind of a decision, it will be an unfortunate thing. But fact is, where do we draw a line for these kind of inquiries? That is the problem.
But the fact is that if you say that this happened somewhere earlier, it wasn't when he was working with us, the fact remains, if indeed the allegations are true, then you have a sexual predator who is heading an organization, and a big organization, and that also cannot be acceptable to us. So for sure there has to be an investigation into what's going on. And I just want to point out that former cricketer Shishir Hattangdi actually took to social media today And he said, if the BCCI want information about Rahul Johri on MeToo, I am happy to assist them. I'm putting my hand up as a former captain. It is not about Rahul Johri and their ilk. It is about representing a country's sport through the BCCI on a world forum. So that's the second tweet where it's revered. So individuals cannot be above the game. Caesar's wife must be above suspicion, if at all there is suspicion. So I believe he's offered to help with this investigation, and that the lady has actually gotten in touch with him. And I don't know if it's the same lady or if it's another one, but she's made allegations of sexual harassment against Mr. Johri, and Mr. Shishir Hatangdi has offered to help. So there is certainly an investigation that will happen now. The fact of the matter is, until then, can he be the CEO or not? Rahul Mehra wanted to come in. Go ahead, please. What would you like to say?
Well, I just wanted to say, probably if I again get my facts right, there's another lady who said that while she was being interviewed for a post as a media manager, there were certain acts which were committed by Mr. Johri. Now, one doesn't know about the veracity of it, but if those allegations are there, that's the other one which happened while he was in BCCI. It's again based on what I read on the websites and based on the news channels. So obviously there's a larger menace, and like Shishir is saying, it's probably not only about an individual. It's about the ilk which is out there. It's about menfolk. It's about this education which needs to be imparted in schools. It's about the families that we come from. It's about the male-dominated society that we live in. It's about the chauvinistic attitude that we have. It's also about the misogynist attitude that is all pervasive. So, it's easy to just put it in compartments and say that, this is what the problem is. But the problem really is deep-rooted. And I'm so glad that women today are getting the voice. I'm so glad that they are getting the support that they're getting. I'm so glad that, the media houses are actually supporting these causes. It really helps in ensuring that women get that power which they so richly deserve, which over centuries they have been denied. So more power to
look
such
what
women.
is happening, Mr. Mehra. Look what is also happening.
There has to be a
number of
process. There has to be principles of natural justice which has to be followed.
The number of women who were speaking up, say 10 days ago, has now gone down. It's not gone down because instances of sexual harassment have gone down, or because everything has been outed. And I feel perhaps because in multiple cases you've now seen defamation suits being filed, the biggest of the lawyers being brought in, an army of lawyers being brought in to drag these ladies to various courts, that women have again started to think twice about whether they want to really take this battle on, about whether they really want the entire world to be questioning them, judging them and mocking them again. And perhaps which is why now lesser women are speaking up. And we don't want that to happen. So it was all great in the first 2 weeks where everybody came out and said, oh yeah, we are listening to you and we do understand you. But look what's happening now, Simran. Look what's happened to Vintananda, where Alok Nath's wife went to the court and said, I don't even want her speaking to the media. Stop her from speaking to the media. Thankfully, the court said, no, it's her right. She can continue to go ahead and speak to whoever she feels like doing while we decide on your plea. But do you believe that perhaps the threat, and a very real threat of long legal tangles, along with the fact that in many cases now action is not being taken, will somehow dampen the entire spirit of MeToo? Simran?
Yes, I couldn't agree more with you. I think you really summarized it very well. But
yes, Rahul, I'll just take that question across to Simran Kaur, and I will come back to you. Simran.
Sorry.
Yeah, so I think, Tanvi, let's just forget that it's a long legal process. Let me tell you one thing, that one of my, colleagues, she was actually sexually assaulted, and it was an attempt to rape. She came out with her story. It was against a casting director, and she went to Versova police station. They have refused to take her complaint. They're not writing an FIR. So she's been crying since then. I'm giving her support, and people from the industry, they are throwing him out of his projects. But it is when people say, why don't they go legal? Then I'm telling you, they're not taking the complaints. The cops are not taking the complaints. And still people are asking questions that why she's anonymous and why she's not coming out on her story. That's why I said that if, somebody steps aside, it might give her more courage that people are supporting and she will come out and talk about it. So giving a support to that girl is really important.
Yes. Mr. Bimal Soni, what would you like to say to that? Giving the support, showing her, giving her some confidence right now that we will listen to you and we will not make it another game of power and politics of BCCI, but we will give you a chance. How do you do that?
But I agree on the part that we should support the lady. We should try and do that. But I again say, since it's only a report which has to come just in 15 days, to ask Johri to step down, I don't agree with that. What I mean is, he's already on trial for 15 days. Let the investigation go on. Support the lady wherever required. Help the lady get the right, judgment from the panel which has been put up. But don't make Johri guilty till proved otherwise.
No, obviously
Hence,
not.
give him
Nobody is
15
making him
days,
guilty, but
and
look
if
at
he's
the
proved
pace
guilty,
with
obviously,
which
he has to-
BCCI is even moving. They took 12 days to even decide on setting up the committee. They sent him a notice. We don't know whether he responded to that notice and explained his side of the story or what happened. So it's not as if anybody is rushing to hang him or kick him out. The process is being followed. But the point is to say, if he continues to be this man in a position of power,
the time.
how will anybody get the courage to come out and speak up?
I'm again repeating the same thing. Now it's only 15 days. If they have delayed it by 10 days, that was a problem which was happening earlier. But now a committee has been formed, 15 days time has been given, and why rush it for 5 days or 7 days? When this thing is not new, this thing is something the lady had, this is an instance which happened before Johri had joined BCCI. So this is something from his previous employment. So what I am trying to say, 15 days is a very legitimate time for the inquiry to be decided, and then let's take action. What the inquiry finds him wrong, then he has to go. But let's not try and ask him to resign today, tell him to go immediately, because I think a fair amount of chance should be given, and if he is not guilty, he will be saved. But if he is guilty, he has to go. So 15 days, I am very clear. The committee has got 15 days, let them take a call, and then Johri should be asked or any action should be taken against her.
Rahul Mehra, what are the rules, legally speaking, when the alleged incident hasn't happened at the current workplace, when it's an allegation from where he worked previously? Then what does the organization do?
Well, I think as far as this particular inquiry is concerned, the terms of reference are very clear to the committee that it's not only the current employment, but also since the person concerned is employed with the current employer, the employer has asked that if there are any instances, whether in this employment or the previous ones, then those are also open to inquiry. And these are the terms of references which have been created. It's a private body. It could have its own terms. So there is absolutely no bar anywhere. Having said that, obviously, once the decision is taken, it's not a matter of what Mr. Johri will have to do then. It will be obviously a direction from the and a recommendation which will be then directive to the employer, and the employer being the BCCI will have to carry it out. Otherwise, there are very serious consequences under the Act which will follow. As far as talking about how the MeToo movement will go forward and whether the women will actually be empowered, obviously the odds are stacked always against the weaker section of the society.
Right.
Unfortunately, and I with a huge amount of responsibility say that women fall in that category. It's unfortunate. One of the ways to actually in BCCI make it more empowered is why not explore the opportunity or the option of having more women in BCCI as administrators? Why is it that there is not a single woman administrator
Having more
which is
women represented is a problem in every industry. Rahul Mehra, today a huge gang of Bollywood filmmakers
Absolutely.
and actors went and met the Prime
Not in
Minister
media.
and not a
Media,
single woman
except
was
media.
present. Even in the film fraternity and the likes of the top filmmakers and actors went to meet Prime Minister today, and it's an interesting picture, and 7-8 of them standing with the Prime Minister discussing the way forward for Bollywood. Not even a single woman was part of that. This when the entire conversation and movement about MeToo started from Bollywood, and we've been speaking about women empowerment in Bollywood. That's the status, and that's pretty much in most of the industries in our country. But these things have to start changing. We have to start changing our mindset. Now, I'm not saying that Rahul Johri or anybody who's been accused of sexual harassment should be straight away tagged as guilty and kicked out, their careers completely killed. But there has to be some amount of understanding about the person who's trying to speak up. If she is anonymous today, maybe tomorrow, if you give her enough courage, she will come and speak out. And she will reveal her identity. But what have we done? And not just in the Rahul Johri case, in many other cases, have we done enough to make these survivors confident enough to come out, to say, yes, you are taking on a big person, yes, you are taking on a powerful person, but we all stand with you, and we will do a fair investigation, and we will hear you out. And we will ensure that you don't get targeted, and we will ensure that you don't get mocked or sidelined or insulted in any way. Are we doing enough in that sense? Why is it that already we are seeing lesser and lesser women talk? Is it the fear of legal notices, the legal tangle, or is it because we haven't done enough to give them that confidence to continue with this movement? Something to think about over this weekend. Thank you to all our panelists, and thank you to our viewers for joining us.